At a networking event, someone asks what you do, and you freeze because the real answer is complicated. You're a project manager who codes on weekends, takes pottery classes on Thursdays, and you're halfway through a book on behavioral economics. You pick one answer, simplify it, and feel like a liar. On Sunday night, 7 browser tabs are open, a guitar tutorial, a language app, that online course you bought 4 months ago. You stare at them, close them all, and open Instagram instead. The voice in your head repeats what everyone else has already said out loud: jack of all trades, master of none. Psychologists call this identity diffusion, the sensation that you lack a coherent self, that you're a collection of half-finished projects rather than a person with a purpose. If you're over 30, it stings more because you assume you should have figured this out by now. The question nobody asks is whether the problem is that you're scattered, or whether you're running a brain optimized for a world we no longer understand. If this resonates, subscribe. We're about to challenge everything you've been told about focus. In the 1990s, psychologist Robin Hogarth identified 2 types of learning environments: kind and wicked. Kind environments, like chess or surgery, have rules that stay constant. Practice the same move 10,000 times and you improve. Repetition equals mastery. Wicked environments, the modern career landscape, parenting, entrepreneurship, have rules that change while you're playing. Feedback is delayed or misleading. In wicked environments, pattern recognition beats grinding consistently, and your brain recognizes this. Patricia Linville's 1987 research on self-complexity theory found that people with high self-complexity, multiple distinct identities like coder, climber, poet, showed 40% greater resilience to depression when one domain collapsed, compared to people defined by a single role. When a programmer who only programs gets laid off, their entire identity shatters. When you get laid off, you're still a potter, a runner, a student of economics. You're distributed. Neurologically, your brain is designed to seek novelty in unstable environments as a survival mechanism. This isn't a bug or commitment phobia. You're antifragile. You gain from disorder. What nobody tells you is why you actually quit those hobbies. Neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz won a Nobel Prize for discovering that dopamine isn't a reward chemical, it's a learning signal. It spikes during what he called a reward prediction error, when you learn faster than you expected. This is the novice high. In week 1 of learning guitar, your fingers can't find the chords. By week 3, you're playing a simple song. Your brain didn't predict that level of progress, so dopamine floods your system. You're obsessed and practice every night. By month 4, you hit about 80% competency. You can play most songs with enough practice, but the learning curve flattens and your dopamine crashes, not because the activity stopped being valuable, but because your brain has successfully mapped the pattern. The prediction error is gone. This is the moment you've been taught to feel ashamed. You quit, move to pottery, then coding, then economics, and every time you internalize the message, I'm flaky, I lack discipline, I can't commit, that's not what's happening. The urge to quit isn't laziness, it's your brain signaling that the pattern is successfully mapped, efficiency is achieved, and it's time to hunt for the next information-dense environment. Specialists push through this dopamine desert because they're optimizing for depth in a single domain, which is a valid strategy in kind environments. You're optimizing for information density across domains, while the specialist grinds from 80% to 90% competency, which takes 5 times the effort of getting to 80. You've rotated back into the dopamine-rich zone of a new learning curve. Conventional wisdom says winners never quit, but strategic quitting isn't a character flaw. It's a feature of the polymath brain. Cognitive scientist Deidre Gentner spent decades studying how people solve problems and discovered that most people miss a critical distinction. There are 2 types of knowledge transfer. Near transfer is what most people do. You learn Excel and can use Google Sheets. It's surface-level similarity, same buttons, different interface. Far transfer is when you apply the structure of a biological ecosystem to corporate management, or use music theory to understand code architecture. These look nothing alike on the surface, but underneath they share deep relational structure, hierarchies, feedback loops, pattern recursion. Gentner called this analogical encoding, the ability to strip a problem of its surface features and see its skeleton. You can't do this with one domain. You need multiple source domains. Your hobbies aren't distractions. They're a library of structural metaphors. A musician looks at coding and sees it immediately. Both are hierarchical systems with syntax, with loops, with pattern recognition. They can debug faster than someone who only learned programming in a vacuum because they've already internalized the structure from a completely different domain. The economy is starting to notice. The World Economic Forum's 2025 Future of Jobs report found that 39% of core skills will change by 2030. The top two rising skills are creative thinking and analytical thinking. Most specialists excel at one. You bridge both. This only works if you're strategic. Multitasking is distraction. What you need is serial mastery. The protocol is to choose one pillar per season, 6 to 18 months, and push it to about 80% competency, right where that dopamine drops. Then consciously rotate to your next pillar. Critically, document your cross-domain insights in what I call a metaphor journal. Every time you notice a pattern from rock climbing applying to negotiation tactics, write it down. That's your competitive advantage compounding. You might be thinking you can't quit your job and learn pottery for 6 months. You don't have to. Research by Rusesnewski and Dutton on job crafting shows you can reshape your current role to incorporate your diverse interests. If you're an accountant who loves design, volunteer to redesign the financial dashboard. You satisfy the novelty drive, build unique value, and don't blow up your life. This sounds effective in theory, but if you're 35 rather than 25, doesn't specialization matter more as you age? The opposite is true. Psychologist Raymond Cattell identified 2 types of intelligence in 1963: fluid intelligence, raw processing speed, working memory, the ability to grind through problems with sheer cognitive horsepower, peaks around 25 and declines steadily after. Crystallized intelligence is pattern recognition, wisdom, and the ability to connect distant concepts and see the structure beneath the surface. This doesn't peak until your 40s and 50s, and it barely declines. Most specialists fall into a trap. They built their careers on fluid intelligence, grinding harder and working faster. As they age, that edge dulls. You've been building crystallized intelligence the entire time. Every domain you've explored is another node in your pattern recognition network. As you age, the M-shaped path doesn't just work, it becomes your biological destiny. At 45, your colleagues are hitting mid-career plateaus. Their single-domain expertise is being commoditized by AI, outsourced, or made obsolete by industry shifts. In a leadership meeting, you're the only person in the room who speaks engineering, marketing, and design fluently. You're not translating between departments, you're architecting solutions specialists can't see because they've never stood where you're standing. You're no longer a scattered generalist, you're a structural translator. You don't need to pick one thing. You don't need to apologize for rotating interests. The economy, your brain biology, and the complexity of modern problems are all selecting for people like you. Start your metaphor journal today. Every time you notice a pattern from one domain applying to another, write it down. That's not distraction. That's your competitive advantage compounding. If this resonated, subscribe, because you're not broken, you're just early.